Why is it that Japanese women don't want children anymore? Looking at this graph, we see the continuous decline in Japan's birth rate. And this graph shows the declining interest in having children. It has even gotten to the point where surveys find that as many as 42% of Japanese women may never have children. But why is this happening? Today we're going to explore the various reasons, such as finances, gender roles, and many more, that all build on each other, leading to the current situation in Japan. We will identify the number one reason they choose not to have children, and at the end, we're going to take a look at what the Japanese government is actually doing about it. But first, if you're new here, my name is Alexander. I have a bachelor's degree in Japan Studies, as well as a master's in Global Area Studies, specializing in Japan. And now that we know each other, let's jump right in. Beginning with Japan's intense work culture, which leaves little room for family life. Japan is notorious for their long working hours and an expectation of total dedication to one's company. It's commonly expected that one stays at the office until the boss leaves, and it's even considered rude if you don't. And as such, overtime often goes unpaid. In this environment, women who are building careers may find it nearly impossible to balance work and child rearing. Professional jobs often require late nights or weekend duties, making it difficult to care for a baby or even find time to just date in the first place. As one labor advocate noted, even those with so-called good jobs in Japan have no time to date or do anything but work, sleep, and eat. So these brutal schedules can discourage young adults from pursuing relationships and family formation. For many young Japanese women, pursuing higher education and a career has become a priority, and these opportunities have expanded in recent decades, which is of course a positive thing. Now over half of Japanese women enroll in 4-year university degrees, 51% by 2020, which is a huge increase since the 1980s. Also, women's labor force participation in their 20s has also nearly doubled, reaching 87% for ages 25 to 29. With more women investing in careers, they face a difficult choice: career advancement or motherhood. You might think that you could do both, but unfortunately, Japan's corporate culture often forces women to choose one or the other. Many women know that becoming a mother can derail their career, or that juggling both roles will just be extraordinarily hard without proper support. As a result, many choose to delay or avoid having children entirely in order to focus on work and personal development in their 20s and 30s. Despite women's advancement in both education and employment, another issue holding them back are the traditional gender roles that remain deeply entrenched in Japan. And this actually discourages many women from starting families. Culturally, women are still expected to be the primary caregivers and housekeepers, even if they also hold a full-time job. Japanese men's contributions to chores and child rearing remain very low, so married women end up doing most of the housework and childcare. So this double burden, a full day at work followed by hours of cooking, cleaning, and childcare at home, just makes the idea of marriage seem very not appealing along with motherhood, for career-minded young women especially. Many younger women look at their mothers' and grandmothers' experiences and pull back at the idea of life as an overworked wife and mother. In the past, a woman who married was often expected to quit her job and become a full-time homemaker, tightly connected to the Japanese saying or ideal, which is ryōsai kenbo, the good wife, wise mother ideal. Today, a growing number of women refuse to accept that old deal. They reject the traditional path that leads to what many now regard as a life of domestic drudgery. As one professor explained, when women marry, they have to give up so many things, so many freedoms, and so much independence. Under the current gender norms, the unequal division of labor at home is a major sticking point. Even among dual income households or couples, wives in Japan spend far more time on childcare and house chores than their husbands do, on average. Some raw or candid reflections from Japanese women illustrate this, where some married friends will sometimes describe their husbands as big babies. One single woman observed that they don't really like having to take care of their husbands in addition to the kids. And the expectation that a woman will cater to her husband's needs on top of the child rearing is still common to some degree. Younger women are increasingly unwilling to accept this one-sided expectation. Unless men and women can share the housework and the parenting more equally, many women just prefer to remain child-free, rather than bearing that disproportionate burden. And frankly, understandably so, especially as women just lack support all around. The lack of systemic support for working parents in Japan is another critical reason that women don't want children. Because while the government has rolled out policies on paper, which we will dive into a lot more later, for now, let's just say that, for example, these include paid parental leave and efforts to expand daycare. The reality, however, is often inadequate. Daycare centers in big cities especially have long waiting lists, and securing affordable childcare can be really difficult. Also, many couples have no nearby relatives to help, as the old pattern of multi-generational households is fading. A topic that's super interesting and could be cool for another video, but let me think what you know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Yeah, anyway, so let me think what you know. Yes, good. So aside from the intergenerational households not being there to help, it's also not common in Japan to, for example, hire nannies. And this leaves working mothers juggling childcare with little outside help. Therefore, it's really no surprise that 70% of Japanese surveyed said it's hard to find a job which supports raising children, reflecting how few workplaces truly accommodate employees with kids. Furthermore, women who do become mothers often face unofficial penalties at work. The term matahara, short for maternity harassment, was coined to describe the prevalent harassment or unfair treatment of women who get pregnant or take maternity leave. In one government survey, almost half of female temporary employees reported being dismissed, demoted, or verbally abused after becoming pregnant or giving birth. But even among full-time women as well, about 1 in 5 experienced such mistreatment when they had a child. Women have been told by bosses to quit once they're pregnant or warned not to expect any accommodations. And although this, of course, violates labor laws, it still happens frequently, creating a climate of fear that having a baby could sabotage a woman's entire career. Now, in practical terms, many Japanese workplaces remain inflexible for parents. Overtime and face time are valued at the company, making it hard for employees, especially mothers, to leave early for child-related needs or child caring. Few men also take paternity leave, despite it being legally available, technically, due to stigma and pressure at work as well. All of these factors make combining work and motherhood extremely challenging. As a result, many women avoid having children because they know they would be forced to choose between their job and their family. So in short, without robust support like reliable childcare, flexible hours, and protection against discrimination, many Japanese women feel that having a child will derail the life that they've worked hard to build. So they often opt just not to take that risk. But taking a step back from the labor market that we've explored till now, there are also cultural and societal factors at play. For example, a fundamental driver of low births in Japan is that people are marrying later in life, or not marrying at all, and thus not having children. And that's because culturally, in Japan, marriage is still largely seen as a prerequisite for childbearing. In Japan, only 2% of births happen outside of marriage. Therefore, if there's a decline in marriage, this directly translates into fewer babies overall. Over the past few decades, marriage patterns have dramatically shifted. For example, the share of women between 25 and 29 who were single skyrocketed from 21% in 1975 to 66% in 2020, so more than tripling. And if we look at women between 30 to 34, it went from 8% to 39% in that same period. In other words, a large proportion of women spend their prime childbearing years unmarried. Because of this, the average age of first marriage has also climbed to around 29 for women and 30.5 for men, which shortens the window of opportunity for having kids. The reasons behind delayed or foregone marriages are multifaceted, but one big factor is the difficulty in finding what's coined a suitable partner. According to surveys by Japan's National Institute of Population and Social Security Research, the most common reason never married individuals gave for why they remain single was, "I haven't yet been able to find a suitable partner," especially for those in their late 20s and early 30s. Right now, there is something of a marriage squeeze in the Japanese dating market, which is just a really weird way of saying that highly educated women often prefer to marry a man with equal or higher education and income, which is similar in the US. But those men are in short supply because fewer men go to college now and secure high-paying jobs are scarce. At the same time, many less educated or lower-income men struggle to find wives as women worry about their ability to be breadwinners. This mismatch leaves a lot of people single. Another reason is the changing priorities in young adulthood. In the past, societal pressures to marry by a certain age were quite strong in Japan. So, for example, women over 25 were once disparagingly called Christmas cakes because they were unsold by the 25th, so after the 24th. So today, that stigma has faded, and many women in their 20s don't really feel that rush to marry anymore. In fact, more are prioritizing their personal goals, like wanting to devote themselves to work or study, or wanting to enjoy hobbies and pastimes. These reasons were frequently cited as the top reasons for wanting to stay single among young adults. In government surveys, the share of respondents who say, "You don't necessarily have to marry or have children," has been increasing, and marriage is no longer seen as the only path to a fulfilling life, especially for women who have careers and friends and interests of their own. This shift is reflected in lifestyle trends. A significant portion of young Japanese adults are not in romantic relationships at all. One recent survey of 18 to 34-year-olds found nearly 60% of unmarried women and 70% of unmarried men are not currently in a relationship. Some of this is due to hectic work schedules, of course, and economic worries, but it also does indicate that there is this sort of singles culture gaining acceptance. Many unmarried women, for example, live with their parents into adulthood, a term called, or a phenomenon dubbed, parasite singles by one sociologist. This allows them to save money and spend it on travel, shopping, and leisure instead of settling down to start a family. Of course, this isn't unique to women. It's also a thing among men. Women today are just the focus of the video. Anyway, by the time some of these women might reconsider, they may feel that their biological clock has ticked too far. Others remain content with single life. So, to summarize, later and fewer marriages mean many Japanese women simply never get to the stage of having children. And this is a deliberate choice for some, others not. As hinted towards just before, underlying several of the trends showcased so far is a broader sociocultural shift in values. Young Japanese women today place greater emphasis on independence, freedom, and self-fulfillment, and correspondingly less on traditional family expectations. As women have gained education and economic opportunities, their life aspirations have expanded. They no longer feel that becoming a wife and mother is a societal duty or the sole source of their identity. Not long ago, a woman who stayed single might have faced open criticism or even pity, like with the entire not being sold by the 25th birthday cake thing. But now, there's this increasing acceptance of the child-free or single-by-choice lifestyle among the younger generations. Personal anecdotes illustrate this changing mindset. Women like Kaori Shibuya, a 34-year-old entrepreneur who was profiled in a New York Times piece, relish their new independence, where they get to enjoy their careers, travel, and spend time with friends without the constraints of marriage. Many Japanese women today no longer feel that they need a husband for emotional or economic security, whereas in earlier eras, marriage was virtually mandatory for stability. In fact, about 25% of Japanese women in their late 30s have never been married, up from only 10% 2 decades ago, demonstrating how common it has become to remain single well into adulthood. Now, crucially, being single or childless is increasingly seen as valid, but there's a small trend of women even celebrating their single status. For example, some companies offer solo weddings, where unmarried women will dress up as brides for a photo shoot and banquet purely for themselves. While this is a niche phenomenon, it symbolizes the idea that a woman's worth is not tied to having a husband or children. But also, I just gotta say, on a personal note, I think personal empowerment is great. And if you want to celebrate singledom, go for it. But the solo wedding thing, kind of weird to me. Just saying. Anyway. Individual lifestyle and happiness are taking a priority over societal expectations. Many young women witness the sacrifices that their mothers made and decide they want a different path. And the fact that more than half of young single Japanese, 55% of those aged 18 to 29, in a 2023 survey said that they do not want children in the future. 55%. Underscores how prevalent this mindset has become.
自由がなくなるっていう感じがちょっと私はかなり強いかなと、縛られるというかやっぱりね、一度きりの人生なので自分の好きに生きたいなっていう、
私も一緒なんですけど、やっぱ好きな趣味とかが多いので、結婚すると自分のやりたいことができなくなっちゃうかなっていうのがあって、やっぱ縛られちゃうっていうのがすごい感じてて、
This is a stark change from previous generations and represents a cultural shift towards valuing quality of life over following the expected life script. But now we move on to a juicy one, or a juicy reason: finances, or economy. Like many of the reasons until now, this is a multifaceted issue in and of itself. So, for example, from daycare fees to cram school, known as juku in Japanese, and even university tuition, raising a child in Japan can be really expensive. Even before all of that, just the costs of giving birth at a hospital or clinic ranges from $3,200 to $6,400. From there, take daycare. While public options do exist, they usually have extreme wait lists, as mentioned earlier, and so realistically, most have to use private daycare, which again is really expensive. On top of this, juku or cram schools start from $5,000 and go as high as $13,000 per year. And as more than 50% of students attend juku during junior high school, there is a pressure for parents to enroll their kids if they want them to be able to compete and enter good schools. Not to mention having to pay for school in uni itself as well. And consider if you have more children, how this can easily ramp up. Now, considering all of this, finances are a major point of consideration. In fact, over half, 52.6% of couples who have fewer children than they would ideally like to say it's because it simply costs too much to raise and educate children. When you combine that with the stagnant wages and job insecurity that's growing, these worries are just amplified further. Especially after Japan's long economic stagnation, many young people feel they can't afford to start a family. For single women, the prospect of supporting a child on one income is particularly daunting. And unlike some Western countries, having a baby outside of marriage, as covered earlier, is really rare, at only about 2% in Japan. So single women who don't marry often remain childless just by default. Many women and men hold off on marriage and kids until they feel that they are financially stable. But again, with Japan's rise in low-paid, irregular jobs and contract work, which I made a previous video on if you're interested, that stability is increasingly elusive. Younger workers often juggle part-time jobs with low salaries and no benefits, making the long-term costs of children, from diapers all the way to university, just feel like an impossible undertaking. In short, economic uncertainty and the high cost of child rearing lead many young Japanese women to conclude that having children is financially out of reach. By the way, surveys consistently find that the number one reason Japanese women cite for not having or wanting children is the expense of child rearing and subsequent education. But before we find out what the government is doing about these issues, let's take a quick comparative look for some perspective. Japan is not alone in facing these issues. South Korea, in particular, mirrors many of the same trends, often in an even more extreme form even. South Korea now has the world's lowest fertility rate at around 0.8 per woman in 2021, even lower than Japan's comparative 1.3. Korean women are highly educated and increasingly career-focused, yet they encounter a rigid work culture and strong patriarchal norms very similar to Japan's. A recent analysis by the OECD found that the main reason for South Korea's ultra-low birth rate is that women are forced to choose between a career and having a family. Sound familiar? So with inflexible workplaces and unequal sharing of childcare, this pushes women to opt out of motherhood altogether, much like Japan. South Korean women carry a disproportionate burden at home, and the costs of raising children, especially education and housing, are sky high. It's therefore not really any surprise that many young Korean women are also delaying marriage or deciding to remain childless altogether. In both societies, rapid economic modernization and greater gender equality in education and employment have sort of collided with traditional gender expectations, resulting in fewer women willing to sacrifice their careers and independence for motherhood. Now, the United States, on the other hand, provides an interesting contrast. The US fertility rate has also been falling, like most countries in the West, or the world really, to about 0.6 or 0.7 in recent years. And American women too cite reasons like cost of children and career considerations for having smaller families or delaying childbirth. However, the situation differs in a few different ways, or in a few ways. First, marriage is not a strict prerequisite for childbearing in the US. Roughly 40% of American births are to unmarried mothers, whereas in Japan, again, it's only 2. A massive difference. And this means that American women who want children have more flexibility to have a baby even if they haven't married or if they prioritize career first. Many use alternatives like single parenthood or cohabitation, which are less socially accepted in Japan. Additionally, the US benefits from immigration and a relatively younger demographic overall, which has helped to sustain higher birth rates than East Asian countries. Culturally, while American women also strive for work-life balance and independence, there is somewhat less of a career versus family trade-off in the sense that part-time work, telecommuting, and or re-entering the workforce after kids can be feasible, or at least more feasible. That's not to say it's easy, given childcare costs in the US and the lack of federal paid leave, but gender roles in the US, though still unequal, are generally more flexible, and it's more common for American fathers to share child rearing duties. compared to the traditionally hands-off Japanese husbands. Again, speaking in broad terms here, doesn't apply to everyone. These differences mean that although young women in the US are having fewer children than before, the decline is not as steep as in Japan or South Korea. That said, the core concerns of economic strain, career constraints, and personal choice resonate across all of these countries. Young people around the world are marrying later and having fewer kids due to similar pressures. But Japan, alongside with South Korea, represents the forefront or the extreme of this phenomenon. So, what's actually being done? And Japan's government has poured resources into pro-family policies for decades, from child allowances to expanded daycare, in hopes of nudging up the birth rate. And so far, these efforts have, at best, only had moderate effects, because they don't really fully address the deeper issues, such as the grueling work culture, the gender inequality in childcare, and the changing aspirations of women today. Now, let's cover 6 more recent and specific measures being taken. Number 1, beginning in April 2023, when they established the Children and Families Agency, which is a new centralized body under the Cabinet Office that coordinates policies across childcare access, parenting support, child allowances, abuse prevention, and improving women's work-family balance. As of 2023, the government earmarked 3.5 trillion annually, specifically for childcare and family-related support. Number 2, enhanced financial support for families. So starting October 2024, child allowance is extended through high school and income caps were removed. Allowances also increased to 30,000 yen per month for third and subsequent children. There's also the childbirth subsidy, which is a lump sum or one-time childbirth payment raised from 420,000 to 500,000 yen. Number 3, expanding daycare access and flexibility. Plans underway to launch an all-children daycare system by around 2025, providing daycare regardless of parents' employment status. Daycare infrastructure is being ramped up to eliminate the waitlists, especially for children under age 2. Number 4, work culture reform. Starting April 2025, Tokyo offers a 4-day work week, 80% hours but full pay, for government employees, plus early leave for parents of young children, aimed at improving work-family balance. Tokyo also has plans to make daycare free for all preschoolers beginning September. Number 5, new social support measures. Tokyo is subsidizing up to 100,000 yen per childbirth for epidurals, which originally cost 200,000, aiming to reduce pain and encourage families. The Children and Families Agency has initiated surveys and working groups to understand why young people, particularly those between 25 and 34, aren't marrying, and to explore matchmaking and dating app solutions. Number 6, the official New Dimension Plan. So in 2023, Prime Minister Kishida proposed the New Dimension measure with 4 pillars. Number 1, doubling child allowances, especially for third child and above. Abolishing income limits for eligibility. Also expanding daycare and family services. And lastly, strengthening the work-family balance. So, as you can tell, they're doing a lot, but despite these sweeping reforms, Japan's demographic indicators continue to worsen. In 2024, birth fell below 700,000 for the first time in recorded history, and the fertility rate hit a new low of 1.15 children per woman. This underscores that while financial aid and service expansions are essential steps, they alone may not be sufficient. Underlying issues like workplace inequality, entrenched gender norms, and cultural shifts still need deeper systemic reform. As one Japanese woman plainly put it, observing the trade-offs that her peers face, I can absolutely see why people would opt out. It's hard. And each of the reasons covered in this video contributes to that hard reality. And together they are reshaping a generation's approach to family life in Japan. But what's more is that women choosing not to have children is only one side of the coin. So to learn about the other side, why Japanese men don't want children anymore, you can check out this video next. And if it isn't out yet, be sure to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell to be notified next week as it comes out. And until then, see ya.